Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to the very beginning of civilization, to the land of ancient Mesopotamia, where the world's first cities, kings, laws, and writing were born. If you enjoy calm history stories that help you relax and fall asleep, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and settle in as we journey thousands of years into the past. Imagine opening your eyes more than 5,000 years ago between two mighty rivers called the Tigris and the Euphrates. There are no highways, no electricity, no skyscrapers, and no modern countries. Instead, endless plains stretch toward the horizon, while muddy riverbanks shimmer beneath the rising sun. At first glance, the land appears empty. But look closer and you notice small villages built from sun-dried mud bricks. Smoke rises gently from simple homes as farmers prepare for another long day. These people are not simply surviving. Without realizing it, they are laying the foundation for almost everything that defines civilization today. Every harvest depends on the rivers because rain is rare and unreliable. When the rivers flood, they leave behind rich soil perfect for growing barley and wheat. But the floods can also destroy everything without warning. To survive, entire communities work together, digging canals and building embankments to guide the water where it is needed. This cooperation changes society forever. Families become villages, villages become towns, and towns slowly transform into the first true cities the world has ever seen. One of these cities is called Uruk. From a distance, it rises proudly above the flat landscape, surrounded by thick walls that seem almost unbelievable for their time. Thousands of people live inside, each performing different jobs. Some farm, others shape clay into pottery. Some weave cloth, while skilled craftsmen create jewelry from precious stones brought by merchants. Traveling hundreds of miles, for the first time in history, not everyone needs to grow food. New professions appear, and society becomes more organized with each passing generation. At the center of every city stands a massive stepped temple known as a ziggurat. Built layer upon layer, it towers above every home below. The people believe their gods watch over them from the heavens, and the temple serves as the bridge between earth and sky. Priests oversee ceremonies, store grain, and help manage the city's resources. Religion, politics, and daily life are woven so closely together that separating them would seem impossible to anyone living there. The priests are not the only powerful people in Uruk. Kings begin to emerge, claiming that the gods have chosen them to rule. Their responsibilities are enormous. They must protect the city from enemies, organize workers to repair canals, collect grain as taxes, and settle disputes between families. A successful king brings prosperity, while a weak one risks famine and invasion. Every decision can determine whether thousands of people survive another year. As the city grows, a surprising problem appears. It becomes impossible to remember every trade, every harvest, and every tax by memory alone. Someone invents a remarkable solution. Using a sharpened reed, scribes press tiny wedge-shaped marks into soft clay tablets. At first, these symbols simply count sheep, jars of oil, or sacks of grain. But over generations, they become something extraordinary. Writing is born. For the first time, knowledge can outlive the people who created it. Stories, laws, business records, prayers, and royal commands are preserved for future generations. Becoming a scribe is one of the most respected professions in Mesopotamia. Young boys spend years practicing hundreds of difficult symbols until they can write quickly and accurately. Mistakes are not easily erased from wet clay, so patience becomes one of their greatest skills. While only a small part of the population can read and write, their work keeps the entire civilization functioning. Merchants also play a vital role. Although Mesopotamia has fertile farmland, it lacks many valuable resources. There is little stone, almost no timber, and few metals. Traders travel across deserts, mountains, and rivers exchanging grain. wool, and textiles for copper, tin, cedar wood, gold, and precious gemstones. Their journeys connect distant cultures that would otherwise never meet. Every caravan returning through the city gates carries not only goods, but also new ideas, technologies, and stories from lands beyond the horizon. Daily life, however, remains filled with hard work. Before sunrise, farmers lead oxen into the fields. Women grind grain into flour for bread. Fishermen cast their nets into the rivers, and potters shape wet clay into bowls that will soon dry beneath the blazing. Mesopotamian soon, children help their parents from an early age, learning the skills they will depend upon for the rest of their lives. Even in one of history's first great civilizations, survival still depends on the labor of ordinary people whose names will never be recorded on the clay tablets that endure for thousands of years. As the cities become richer, they also become more competitive. Each city-state wants control over fertile farmland, valuable trade routes, and precious water from the rivers. Peace rarely lasts for long. Soldiers carrying spears, shields, and bronze weapons march across the dusty plains while kings dream of expanding their borders. Tall defensive walls surround every major city, reminding both visitors and enemies that prosperity must constantly be protected. Yet victory in Mesopotamia is often temporary. One generation celebrates conquest while the next struggles against a new rival determined to take everything away. Among the many rulers remembered by history, one legendary figure stands above the rest. His name is Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk. Whether every story about him is true remains uncertain, but his adventures become the world's oldest surviving epic. According to the ancient tale, Gilgamesh begins as a proud and powerful ruler whose strength seems almost beyond human. After forming a deep friendship with a wild man named Enkidu, he learns lessons about courage, loss, and the fragile nature of human life. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh travels across distant lands searching for the secret of eternal life. His quest ultimately teaches that no king, no matter how mighty, can escape death forever. Instead, people achieve immortality through the cities they build, the stories they leave behind, and the lives they touch. Centuries pass, and another great city rises to dominate Mesopotamia. Babylon grows from a regional settlement into one of the most famous cities in history. Its walls impress travelers from every direction, while bustling markets overflow with merchants speaking different languages. During the reign of King Hammurabi, Babylon becomes the heart of a powerful kingdom. Hammurabi understands that ruling many different cities requires more than military strength. He introduces one of history's earliest and most influential legal codes. Hundreds of laws are carved into a tall stone monument where everyone can see them. The code covers marriage, trade, farming, theft, wages, property, and punishment. Although many of its penalties seem harsh by modern standards, the idea that written laws should apply throughout a kingdom becomes one of Mesopotamia's greatest contributions to civilization. The belief that justice should be recorded rather than remembered only by powerful individuals influences countless societies that will emerge thousands of years later. Babylon's success attracts admiration, but it also invites danger. Powerful kingdoms rise beyond the horizon, each determined to control the fertile lands between the rivers. Over the centuries, the map of Mesopotamia changes again and again as empires appear, expand, and eventually collapse. The Assyrians become one of the most feared military powers the ancient world has ever known. Their armies are disciplined, heavily armed, and remarkably organized. Engineers build siege towers, battering rams, and ladders capable of overcoming even the strongest city walls. News of an approaching Assyrian army spreads fear long before the soldiers themselves arrive. Yet these warriors are more than conquerors. They construct magnificent palaces decorated with enormous stone carvings, showing lions, kings, and victorious battles. Their capital cities become centers of administration, engineering, and learning. One Assyrian ruler, Ashurbanipal, develops one of history's first great libraries. Thousands of clay tablets are carefully collected from across Mesopotamia and stored together. Without this collection, many ancient stories, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, might have disappeared forever beneath the dust of time. Meanwhile, ordinary life continues much as it always has. At sunrise, fishermen launch small reed boats onto quiet rivers while farmers inspect canals that carry precious water toward their fields. Bakers fill the streets with the smell of fresh bread. Potters fire clay vessels in blazing kilns, and merchants loudly advertise goods arriving from distant lands. Children chase one another through narrow streets before beginning lessons or helping their parents with daily work. Life is demanding, but festivals bring moments of celebration. Music fills temple courtyards as drums, harps, and flutes accompany songs dedicated to the gods. Families gather for shared meals, telling stories that have been passed from one generation to the next. Above them, priests study the night sky with remarkable attention. Mesopotamian astronomers carefully record the movements of the moon, planets, and countless stars. They believe the heavens contain messages from the gods, but their observations also lead to practical discoveries. They create detailed calendars, improve mathematics, and develop a numbering system based on 60. Thousands of years later, people across the world still divide an hour into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds, preserving a quiet reminder of Mesopotamia's extraordinary influence. Even though the names of its kingdoms gradually fade, many of their greatest ideas continue, shaping human civilization long after the mighty walls of Babylon and Nineveh begin to crumble beneath the winds of history. As centuries pass, the balance of power shifts once again. The mighty Assyrian Empire eventually weakens after years of constant warfare and internal struggles. Cities that once feared Assyrian armies seized the opportunity to rebel. In 612 BC, a coalition led by the Babylonians and Medes marches toward Nineveh, the magnificent Assyrian capital. After a brutal siege, the city falls. Palaces that had dazzled visitors with towering statues and colorful decorations are consumed by flames. For those living through the event, it must have seemed impossible that such a powerful empire could disappear. Yet history repeatedly proves that no kingdom lasts forever. In the centuries that follow, Babylon enjoys a remarkable revival. Under King Nebuchadnezzar II, the city reaches new heights of wealth and beauty. Massive walls surround its neighborhoods. Broad processional roads welcome travelers, and the famous Ishtar Gate glows with brilliant blue glazed bricks decorated with lions and dragons. Ancient writers describe Babylon as one of the greatest cities on earth. Whether every legend is accurate or not, there is little doubt that visitors would have been overwhelmed by its size and splendor. Some even speak of the mysterious Hanging Gardens, said to have been built for a queen who missed the green mountains of her homeland. Historians continue debating whether these gardens truly existed or became a beautiful legend passed through generations. Eventually, another rising power appears from the east. In 539 BC, the Persian king Cyrus the Great enters Babylon. Unlike many conquerors before him, he allows much of the city's administration and traditions to continue. Mesopotamia becomes part of a vast empire stretching across enormous distances. Although political control changes hands, everyday life along the Tigris and Euphrates continues much as it always has. Farmers still depend on carefully maintained canals. Merchants still fill busy marketplaces, and scribes continue pressing wedge-shaped symbols into clay. But slowly, over many centuries, new languages replace old ones, different styles of writing become more common, and the ancient traditions of the first civilization gradually fade. Wind and sand begin covering abandoned temples. broken walls, and forgotten streets. Entire cities disappear beneath layers of earth, waiting silently for thousands of years until archaeologists uncover them once again. Every clay tablet, every broken statue, and every weathered brick reminds us that beneath the modern world lies the memory of the people who first imagined cities, invented writing, recorded laws, measured time, and transformed scattered villages into civilization itself. Even after Mesopotamia lost its political power, its influence quietly continued shaping the future of humanity. Greek scholars admired the mathematical knowledge developed in the region. Persian administrators borrowed ideas from earlier kingdoms, and later civilizations inherited techniques that had first appeared between the Tigris and Euphrates. The concept of recording agreements in writing, collecting taxes through organized governments, and preserving knowledge inside libraries all trace part of their history back to these ancient cities. It is remarkable to think that many routines we consider ordinary today have roots stretching back thousands of years to people who wrote on clay instead of paper. Archaeologists have spent generations uncovering this forgotten world. They carefully brush away layers of sand to reveal temples, workshops, homes, streets, and thousands upon thousands of clay tablets. Each discovery answers one question while raising several more. Some tablets contain business records listing sheep, grain, or silver payments. Others preserve prayers, school exercises, recipes, medical treatments, royal letters, or stories copied by patient scribes centuries apart. Together, they allow modern historians to hear voices that would otherwise have been silent forever. Reading these texts reminds us that ancient people laughed, worried, argued, celebrated, and dreamed much like we do today. Parents hoped their children would live better lives. Farmers prayed for favorable weather. Merchants searched for profitable opportunities, and rulers wondered how history would remember them. Daily existence was never easy. Summers were intensely hot. Floods could arrive unexpectedly. Disease spread quickly, and conflicts between neighboring kingdoms remained a constant threat. Yet despite every hardship, generation after generation continued building, improving, and adapting. They refused to abandon the fertile land that had given birth to civilization itself. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson Mesopotamia leaves behind. Progress is rarely the work of one extraordinary individual. Instead, it is created by countless ordinary people performing small tasks every single day. A farmer digging another irrigation canal, a mason placing another brick upon a temple wall, a merchant traveling another dangerous road, or a young scribe carefully pressing another symbol into wet clay could never have imagined that their efforts would influence the entire course of human history. Their names may be forgotten, but the civilization they built became the foundation upon which so much of the modern world would eventually stand. Today, the rivers still flow through the same broad valleys, carrying with them echoes of the first cities, the first written words, and the first great dreams of civilization. As Mesopotamia slowly disappeared beneath layers of earth, its memory survived in unexpected ways. Travelers occasionally stumbled across strange mounds rising from the flat landscape, never realizing they were standing on top of entire cities buried beneath their feet. Local people sometimes carried away ancient bricks to build new homes, unaware that those bricks had once formed the walls of temples and palaces thousands of years earlier. Time has a curious habit of hiding the greatest achievements of humanity until someone begins asking the right questions. During the 19th century, explorers and archaeologists returned with shovels, notebooks, and endless curiosity. Beneath the dust, they uncovered giant statues of winged bulls, carved reliefs showing royal hunts, elegant jewelry, and libraries containing thousands of clay tablets. Each discovery transformed what had once been considered legend into documented history. Scholars patiently learned how to read the wedge-shaped writing known as cuneiform, unlocking stories that had remained silent for more than 2 millennia. Suddenly, the ancient kings seemed alive again through their own words. Merchants described successful journeys, officials recorded taxes, teachers corrected students' writing exercises, and ordinary families signed marriage agreements much as people do today. These simple records revealed that history is not made only by famous rulers, but also by countless individuals whose everyday lives created the rhythm of civilization. Modern science has also confirmed how advanced Mesopotamian knowledge truly was. Their astronomers observed eclipses with impressive accuracy. Mathematicians solved complex problems using a base 60 system, and engineers designed irrigation networks capable of supporting enormous populations in an otherwise difficult environment. Physicians attempted treatments using both practical remedies and religious rituals, reflecting a world where science and belief existed side by side, although many of their medical ideas would later prove incorrect. Their determination to understand illness marked an important step in humanity's long search for knowledge. Looking back across more than 5,000 years, it becomes clear that Mesopotamia was never simply one kingdom or one city. It was a continuous story of innovation, conflict, adaptation, and resilience. Empires rose and fell, languages changed, dynasties disappeared, yet the spirit of invention remained. Every generation inherited the achievements of those before it and added something new before passing the torch onward. In many ways, the history of Mesopotamia is also the history of humanity learning how to live together in larger and more complex societies. Its people could never have imagined airplanes, computers, or satellites, yet they took the very first steps that eventually made all of those possibilities imaginable. Their greatest legacy was not a single monument or one victorious king, but the enduring idea that human beings can build communities, preserve knowledge, and leave something meaningful behind for generations they will never meet. The rediscovery of Mesopotamia also changed the way people understood history itself. Before archaeologists uncovered its buried cities, many believed that civilization had begun much later than it actually did. Every newly translated tablet pushed the story of humanity further into the past. The earliest schools, the earliest written contracts, some of the first organized governments, and even the first recorded complaints between neighbors all emerged from the dusty remains of this remarkable land. One clay tablet contains the frustrated words of a customer unhappy with the quality of copper he had purchased, reminding us that customer complaints are far older than anyone might expect. Another preserves a student's writing exercises, complete with mistakes carefully corrected by a teacher thousands of years ago. These ordinary moments make the ancient world feel surprisingly familiar. Despite the immense passage of time, people still worried about work, family, money, education, and the future. Mesopotamia teaches us that human nature changes far more slowly than technology does. The tools become different, but the hopes and fears remain recognizable across thousands of years. The region itself continues to hold countless secrets beneath its soil. Archaeologists estimate that many ancient settlements have never been fully excavated. Each buried building could contain tablets waiting to reveal unknown kings, forgotten cities, or stories that no modern person has ever read. Some discoveries happen entirely by chance after heavy rains expose old walls or construction projects uncover ancient foundations. Every excavation adds another small piece to a puzzle that has been assembled for generations but is still far from complete. Historians know that many questions may never receive definite answers. We may never learn exactly how certain rulers lived, how every language sounded when spoken aloud, or whether some legendary places truly existed as later writers described them. Yet uncertainty is part of what makes ancient history so captivating. Every surviving artifact offers a conversation between the present and a world that vanished long ago. As you imagine the quiet canals, towering ziggurats, bustling marketplaces, and endless fields stretching between the great rivers, it becomes easier to understand why Mesopotamia is often called the cradle of civilization. It was here that strangers learned to cooperate on a massive scale, where ideas could finally be preserved through writing instead of memory alone, and where cities grew into centers of culture, trade, learning, and government. Long after its empires disappeared, its greatest achievement endured. The foundations laid by those early builders continued supporting countless civilizations that followed, proving that even when kingdoms fade into dust, their ideas can continue shaping the world for thousands of years. Even today, the influence of Mesopotamia quietly surrounds us in ways we rarely notice. Every time a clock marks 60 seconds in a minute, or 60 minutes in an hour, it reflects a numbering system developed by Mesopotamian mathematicians thousands of years ago. Every time a government keeps written records, a business signs a contract, or a library preserves knowledge for future generations, it follows traditions whose earliest roots can be traced back to the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates. History is rarely created all at once. Instead, it grows slowly through countless small discoveries made by ordinary people solving everyday problems. The people of Mesopotamia never set out to invent civilization. They simply wanted reliable harvests, safer homes, fair trade, and stable communities. Yet their practical solutions transformed the future of humanity. Looking across this immense stretch of time, it is impossible not to admire their determination. Floods destroyed crops, drought threatened entire cities, and powerful armies repeatedly swept across the land. Even so, each generation rebuilt canals, repaired walls, reopened markets, and continued teaching children the skills they would need. That quiet resilience became one of Mesopotamia's greatest strengths. It reminds us that civilizations are not built only during moments of glory, but also through patient work repeated day after day. The ruins that remain today are silent, but they still have remarkable stories to tell. Broken bricks once formed temples where thousands gathered in prayer. Cracked clay tablets once rested in busy schools filled with students practicing their writing. Weathered roads once echoed with the footsteps of merchants carrying goods from distant kingdoms. Every fragment uncovered by archaeologists brings another forgotten voice back into the story of humanity. Ancient Mesopotamia may seem unimaginably distant, yet its legacy continues to live inside the structure of modern society. It gave the world some of its earliest cities, the first known writing system, influential legal traditions, remarkable advances in mathematics and astronomy, and the idea that knowledge should be recorded instead of trusted only to memory. Few places have contributed so much while remaining hidden beneath the earth for so many centuries. As the sun slowly sets over the broad plains where the Tigris and Euphrates still flow, it is easy to picture the first farmers returning from their fields, scribes placing fresh clay tablets onto shelves, merchants closing their market stalls, and children listening to stories beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Their world has long since disappeared, yet the foundations they built continue supporting our own. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The first civilization did not truly vanish. It simply became the beginning of every chapter that followed in the long story of human history. As our journey through ancient Mesopotamia gently comes to an end, it is worth pausing to appreciate just how extraordinary this land truly was. Long before the rise of Greece or Rome, before castles, knights, and medieval kingdoms, people living beside these two rivers were already building cities, recording history, observing the stars, and creating systems of government that would influence countless generations. Their world may have looked very different from our own, yet their curiosity, determination, and creativity remain instantly recognizable. They celebrated successful harvests, worried about uncertain futures, mourned lost loved ones, and hoped their children would enjoy better lives. Across 5,000 years, those simple human emotions have never really changed. Perhaps that is why the story of Mesopotamia still feels so powerful today. It reminds us that every great civilization begins with ordinary people willing to solve difficult problems together. A canal dug by a farmer, a law written by a scribe, a bridge built by skilled workers, or a lesson taught by a patient teacher may seem like small achievements in the moment, but over centuries they become the foundations of history itself. When archaeologists uncover another clay tablet or restore another ruined temple, they are not merely studying ancient stones. They are reconnecting us with the earliest chapters of our shared human story. Every discovery helps us understand where many of our ideas first began and why they continue to shape the modern world. If you could somehow stand on top of a Mesopotamian ziggurat at sunset, you would see farmers returning from distant fields, smoke rising from thousands of mud brick homes, merchants leading tired donkeys through the city gates, and children laughing as the evening air finally grows cooler after another scorching day. Beyond the walls, the rivers continue their endless journey across the fertile plain, just as they have for countless generations. Those same rivers witnessed the birth of writing, the rise of kings, the creation of laws, and the first great cities humanity ever built. They carried both life and destruction, prosperity and hardship, reminding every generation that civilization is always a balance between nature, knowledge, and cooperation. Though the kingdoms of Mesopotamia eventually disappeared, their greatest achievements never truly faded. They became part of the inheritance of every civilization that followed. Even now, thousands of years later, their legacy quietly lives on in the books we read, the laws we follow, the cities we inhabit, and the knowledge we continue to pass from one generation to the next. And with that peaceful thought, our journey through the cradle of civilization finally reaches its gentle conclusion, leaving behind the quiet echoes of the first great society that helped shape the world we know today. Although our story is nearing its end, there is one final thought worth carrying with you into the quiet of the night. Ancient Mesopotamia was never simply a place on a map. It was an idea that changed the course of human history forever. Before these river valleys were settled, most people lived in small farming communities, where life rarely extended beyond the next harvest. In Mesopotamia, something remarkable happened. Thousands of individuals learned that by working together, they could create something greater than any single family could accomplish alone. From that realization came cities, governments, written records, organized trade, monumental architecture, and shared traditions that connected entire populations. It was not a sudden revolution, but a slow transformation that unfolded across many generations. Each generation inherited knowledge from those before it, improved upon it, and passed it forward. That quiet chain of learning became civilization's greatest strength. When we study Mesopotamia today, we are not only looking at ancient ruins or broken pottery. We are looking at the first chapters of a story that eventually leads to every great civilization that followed. The roads may have vanished, the temples may have crumbled, and the voices of the ancient scribes may have fallen silent, but their influence still reaches into the present day. Every carefully recorded document, every city planned around public spaces, every legal code written for an entire society carries a distant echo of ideas, first explored in this extraordinary land. Even the stars that Mesopotamian astronomers observed continue shining above us tonight, just as they did thousands of years ago. Those early sky watchers could never have imagined telescopes or spacecraft, yet their careful observations marked the beginning of humanity's endless desire to understand the universe. In many ways, that curiosity is the greatest legacy of all. Civilizations rise and fall. Kingdoms appear and disappear. But the human desire to learn, build, and leave the world a little better than it was before continues across every generation. As the night settles over the ancient plains once more, imagine the last lamps growing dim inside mud brick homes, the sounds of the marketplace fading into silence, and the gentle flow of the Tigris and Euphrates, continuing beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The people who lived here are long gone, yet through the cities they built, the words they wrote, and the ideas they created, a part of them still lives on. Their world became the foundation upon which so much of human history was built, making ancient Mesopotamia not only the cradle of civilization, but also one of the greatest reminders that even the oldest stories never truly come to an end. One of the most fascinating parts of Mesopotamia's story is that its greatest treasures were never made of gold. While archaeologists have uncovered beautiful jewelry, impressive statues, and magnificent palaces, the most valuable discoveries often fit in the palm of a hand. Small clay tablets covered with tiny wedge-shaped symbols have revealed more about ancient life than any crown or royal tomb ever could. These tablets tell us how much grain was harvested, how merchants negotiated prices, how students practiced their lessons, and even how families settled everyday disagreements. Through these ordinary records, the ancient people of Mesopotamia stop feeling like distant historical figures and begin to seem like real neighbors living in another age. Some tablets contain recipes for food. Others describe medical treatments, while many preserve prayers asking the gods for healthy children, successful harvests, or protection from disease. Reading these texts reminds us that although thousands of years separate us, human hopes have remained remarkably similar. People wanted peace, security, friendship, and a better future for their families, just as they do today. Time changed the tools they used, but not the dreams they carried. The environment itself constantly shaped life across the region. During years when the rivers flooded at the right moment, crops flourished and cities prospered. When floods arrived too early, too late, or failed completely, famine threatened entire populations. This uncertainty encouraged careful planning. Granaries stored food for difficult seasons. Officials monitored supplies, and communities worked together to maintain canals that stretched for miles across the countryside. Cooperation became essential because no individual family could control the rivers alone. That shared responsibility strengthened the bonds holding these early cities together. As trade expanded farther across Asia and the Middle East, Mesopotamian merchants encountered unfamiliar cultures with different languages, beliefs, and customs. Rather than remaining isolated, these civilizations exchanged ideas along with goods. New technologies spread from one region to another, artistic styles evolved, and knowledge traveled alongside caravans crossing deserts and mountain passes. In many respects, Mesopotamia became one of the ancient world's first great crossroads, connecting distant peoples through commerce and communication. Looking back today, it is astonishing to realize that so many traditions we associate with organized society first took shape in this remarkable land, from humble villages. Beside two unpredictable rivers emerged innovations that transformed the future of humanity. Every brick laid upon a city wall, every canal carved into the earth, and every symbol pressed into soft clay became another step in a journey that would eventually lead to the complex world we know today. Even after thousands of years, the quiet voices of Mesopotamia continue reminding us that history is built not only by legendary kings, but by millions of ordinary people whose daily efforts changed civilization forever. Over the last century, New technologies have allowed researchers to understand Mesopotamia in ways that earlier generations could only imagine. Satellites orbiting high above the Earth can now detect the faint outlines of ancient canals and forgotten cities hidden beneath fields and desert sands. Ground-penetrating radar reveals buried walls without disturbing the soil, while advanced photography helps scholars read damaged clay tablets, whose writing had nearly vanished with time. Each scientific breakthrough adds another piece to the story, proving that the history of Mesopotamia is still being written today. New discoveries continue to surprise even the world's leading archaeologists. Entire neighborhoods remain buried beneath modern towns, and thousands of tablets recovered during excavations have yet to be translated. Some may contain royal letters, while others could preserve poems, scientific observations, or simple household accounts. Every unopened storage box in a museum holds the possibility of changing what we know about the ancient world. It is a reminder that history is never truly finished. There is always another question waiting to be answered. The people of Mesopotamia also left behind remarkable artistic achievements. Skilled craftsmen carved delicate seals from precious stones, each engraved with detailed scenes of gods, animals, or everyday life. These cylinder seals were rolled across wet clay to leave beautiful impressions, serving almost like personal signatures. Potters decorated vessels with elegant designs. Metalworkers shaped bronze into tools and weapons, and jewelers created necklaces and rings that reflected both wealth and extraordinary craftsmanship. Even the simplest household objects reveal the care and creativity of the people who made them. Education played an increasingly important role as cities expanded. Young scribes spent countless hours memorizing hundreds of cuneiform signs, copying the same symbols over and over until every mark became precise. Their classrooms echoed with the sound of reeds, pressing into soft clay while teachers corrected mistakes with strict discipline. Although the lessons were demanding, successful students earned respected positions within temples, palaces, and trading houses. Their ability to read and write opened opportunities unavailable to most people, making education one of the earliest paths towards social advancement. Perhaps the greatest wonder of Mesopotamia is not that it built magnificent cities or powerful kingdoms, but that so much of its wisdom survived despite thousands of years of wars, floods, earthquakes, and changing empires. Fragile clay, baked by accident in ancient fires or hardened beneath the hot sun, proved more durable than paper ever could have been. Because of those humble tablets, voices from 5,000 years ago still speak to us today. They remind us that the beginning of civilization was not a single dramatic moment, but a long and patient journey shaped by generations of people whose quiet determination continues to inspire the modern world. As we take one last gentle walk through the world of Mesopotamia, imagine the first light of dawn spreading across the broad river valleys. The air is still cool, and the streets of the city slowly begin to awaken. Bakers prepare fresh bread in clay ovens. Fishermen untie their reed boats from the riverbank, and merchants arrange baskets filled with grain, dates, wool, and pottery before opening their stalls. Somewhere nearby, a young apprentice carefully mixes wet clay while an experienced builder shapes another brick that will soon become part of a wall, a home, or perhaps even a temple. None of these people believe they are making history. They are simply living another ordinary day. Yet history is often created in exactly this way, through ordinary moments repeated by countless individuals over many generations. The greatness of Mesopotamia was never the achievement of one ruler alone. It belonged to farmers who transformed dry land into fertile fields, craftsmen who turned simple materials into beautiful works of art, scribes who preserved knowledge with patient hands, and families who continued rebuilding after every flood, drought, or invasion. Their combined efforts created a civilization strong enough to influenced the entire ancient world. Even after thousands of years, archaeologists continue uncovering traces of these forgotten lives. A child's toy made from clay, a broken cooking pot, a merchant seal, or a small house hidden beneath layers of earth can reveal just as much about history as the palace of a king. These discoveries remind us that every person, no matter how ordinary, contributed something to the larger story. Ancient Mesopotamia teaches us that progress does not happen overnight. It grows little by little as people solve problems, share ideas, and pass knowledge to the next generation. Looking back across 5 millennia, it becomes clear that civilization itself is one long conversation between the past and the future. Every invention inspires another. Every lesson learned becomes the starting point for someone else. The people who first carved symbols into soft clay could never have imagined that one day their words would be read across the world through glowing screens and modern books. Yet their desire to record knowledge made that future possible. As darkness gently settles once again over the ancient land between the Tigris and Euphrates, the cities grow quiet. The rivers continue their endless journey toward the sea, and the stars shine above exactly as they did for the first astronomers who carefully watched the heavens so long ago. Though the voices of Mesopotamia have faded into history, their ideas still echo through every generation, reminding us that the oldest civilization in the world is never truly gone. It continues to live wherever people choose to learn, create, build, and leave a better world for those who come after them. For thousands of years, winds swept across the ruins of Mesopotamia, carrying dust through empty streets where bustling markets had once been filled with life. Birds nested among the broken stones of temples that had once echoed with prayers, while wild grasses slowly covered the foundations of magnificent palaces. Travelers passing through the region often saw little more than unusual hills rising from the landscape, unaware that entire cities rested beneath their feet. Nature had patiently hidden the birthplace of civilization beneath layers of earth, preserving it until the modern world was finally ready to rediscover its story. When archaeologists carefully uncovered these forgotten places, they realized that every layer of soil represented another chapter of human history. A broken bowl might reveal how people prepared their meals. A child's footprint preserved in dried mud could capture a single ordinary afternoon from nearly 5,000 years ago. Even discarded tools and cracked bricks became valuable clues, allowing historians to reconstruct the rhythm of daily life with remarkable detail. Unlike legendary tales passed from generation to generation, these discoveries came directly from the people who had actually lived there. Their possessions spoke quietly but honestly about their world. One of the most remarkable aspects of Mesopotamia is how deeply it valued knowledge. Scribes copied important texts again and again so that future generations would not lose them. Temples and palaces stored thousands of clay tablets, creating archives that preserved information for centuries. Without those careful records, much of the ancient world's earliest history would have disappeared forever. Today, scholars continue translating tablets that have remained unread since antiquity. Every newly translated line has the potential to change our understanding of the first civilization. Some texts describe royal ceremonies, while others discuss farming techniques, mathematics, astronomy, or simple household accounts. Together, they paint a picture of a society far more sophisticated than many people once imagined. Mesopotamia was not merely ancient. It was innovative, organized, and constantly evolving. It adapted to challenges, welcomed new ideas, and influenced neighboring cultures across the Middle East. Even after later empires replaced its kingdoms, many of its inventions continued spreading from one civilization to another. Looking back now, it becomes clear that the true monument of Mesopotamia was never its temples or city walls. Its greatest achievement was the creation of systems that allowed knowledge, culture, and cooperation to survive beyond a single lifetime. Every written word, every carefully planned canal, every law carved into stone represented an investment in the future. That may be why the story of Mesopotamia continues to inspire people today. It reminds us that lasting civilizations are built not only with bricks and monuments, but with ideas that can endure long after the buildings themselves have returned to dust. Eventually, every civilization reaches a moment when it must pass its legacy to those who come after it. Mesopotamia was no different. Its cities gradually changed under the rule of new empires, its languages slowly faded from everyday speech, and many of its magnificent buildings crumbled with age. Yet the ideas first developed there refused to disappear. They traveled with merchants across deserts, with scholars copying ancient knowledge, and with rulers searching for better ways to organize their kingdoms. In this way, Mesopotamia continued shaping history long after its own political power had vanished. It is fascinating to imagine how many firsts were experienced in this remarkable land. Somewhere, a child learned to read from a clay tablet for the very first time. Somewhere else, a judge listened to a dispute while referring to written laws instead of relying only on memory. A merchant carefully recorded a successful trade, knowing that written accounts would prevent future disagreements. An astronomer stood beneath a cloudless night sky, marking the position of the stars with incredible patience, unaware that future civilizations would build upon those observations for centuries. These quiet moments rarely appear in dramatic stories, yet together they transformed human society more than many famous battles ever could. The rivers themselves remained the constant heart of Mesopotamia. Year after year they flowed through the fertile plains, bringing both life and uncertainty. Entire communities depended upon understanding their rhythms. Too little water meant drought, while too much threatened destruction. Learning to live alongside these powerful rivers required planning, cooperation, and trust between neighbors. In many ways, the challenges created by nature encourage people to work together, leading to larger and more organized communities than had ever existed before. This cooperation became one of the defining characteristics of civilization itself. Today, visitors walking through museums around the world can stand only a few steps away from objects created more than 5,000 years ago. A clay tablet bearing the fingerprints of the scribe who shaped it, a carefully carved cylinder seal once carried by a merchant, or a fragment of painted pottery can create an unexpected connection across thousands of years. These artifacts remind us that the people of Mesopotamia were not mysterious strangers from another world. They smiled, worried, celebrated, learned, and hoped just as we do. Their clothing, language, and customs may have been different, but their humanity was the same. That realization may be the greatest gift ancient history offers us. It shows that despite the passing of countless generations, the desire to build a better future, protect loved ones, and leave behind something meaningful has always been at the heart of the human story, beginning in the fertile valleys where civilization first opened its eyes. Perhaps the most enduring lesson of ancient Mesopotamia is that true greatness is measured not only by monuments, wealth, or military victories, but by the ideas a civilization leaves behind. The mud brick walls of Uruk eventually collapsed. The palaces of Babylon slowly fell into ruin, and the mighty temples that once dominated the skyline became silent reminders of a distant age. Yet the knowledge created within those cities survived. Writing allowed ideas to travel beyond a single lifetime. Laws brought order to growing communities. Mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and organized government continued evolving long after the first Mesopotamian kingdoms had disappeared. Their greatest achievement was not simply building the world's earliest cities, but proving that human cooperation could accomplish extraordinary things. Looking across the thousands of years that separate us from those first settlers, it is remarkable to realize how much of our modern world still reflects their achievements. Every generation has added another chapter to the story that began between the Tigris and Euphrates. The people of Mesopotamia could never have imagined the world we live in today, yet they helped make it possible. Their determination, curiosity, and willingness to solve problems became the foundation upon which later civilizations continued to build. As the evening grows quiet over the ancient river valleys, imagine the final light of the sun fading behind the distant horizon. The busy streets become peaceful, the marketplaces fall silent, and the stars slowly appear above the same sky that inspired the first astronomers thousands of years ago. The rivers continue flowing as they always have, carrying with them the echoes of humanity's earliest dreams.
Though the voices of Mesopotamia have long since faded into history, their legacy remains alive wherever people choose to learn, create, share knowledge, and build a better future. And with that gentle thought, our journey through the cradle of civilization comes to a peaceful close, as historians continue studying Mesopotamia. They are often reminded that the ancient world was far more connected than it first appears. Caravans travelled across vast distances carrying copper from the mountains, cedar wood from distant forests, precious stones from faraway lands, and fine textiles woven by skilled craftsmen. Along with these valuable goods came stories, languages, inventions, and traditions. Every journey helped spread new ideas from one culture to another, turning Mesopotamia into one of the earliest centres of international trade. The bustling marketplaces of cities like Uruk and Babylon would have been filled with voices from many different regions, creating an atmosphere unlike anything humanity had experienced before. This exchange of knowledge encouraged innovation. Farmers learned improved methods of irrigation, builders experimented with stronger designs, and merchants developed more reliable systems for measuring weight and value. Standardized weights and careful records helped people trust one another during trade, allowing commerce to flourish across enormous distances. Trust, cooperation, and written agreements became just as valuable as the goods themselves. The importance of education also continued to grow. Families who could afford it proudly sent their children to schools where they memorized hundreds of cuneiform symbols and practiced mathematics by solving practical problems involving land, grain, and trade. Lessons were demanding, and teachers expected discipline. But successful students often found respected positions serving temples, palaces, or wealthy merchants. Through education, knowledge passed steadily from one generation to the next, ensuring that valuable skills would not be lost. Even religion reflected the close relationship between humanity and nature. The people believed that powerful gods watched over rivers, storms, harvests, and the stars above. Festivals marked the changing seasons, while ceremonies expressed gratitude for successful crops and asked for protection against floods or drought. Although modern perspectives are very different, these beliefs gave communities hope and a sense of shared purpose during uncertain times. Looking back today, it becomes clear that Mesopotamia was much more than the birthplace of cities. It was the birthplace of organised cooperation on a scale never before seen. millions of small decisions, made by ordinary people, gradually created one of the greatest turning points in human history. Every canal they dug, every tablet they wrote, every law they recorded, and every child they taught added another stone to the foundation of civilization.
Their names may have faded into the distant past, but the world they helped create continues to influence every generation that followed, quietly reminding us where so much of our shared human story first began. Beyond its inventions and achievements, Mesopotamia also teaches an important lesson about the passage of time. Even the strongest walls eventually crumble, the richest kingdoms disappear, and the names of powerful rulers slowly fade from memory. What truly survives are the ideas that improve people's lives. The ancient builders of Mesopotamia may never have imagined that thousands of years later, people around the world would still study their cities with admiration. Yet that is exactly what happened. Their influence reached far beyond their own lifetime because they invested in knowledge rather than only in monuments. Every generation inherited something valuable from the one before it and added another small piece before passing it on. That continuous chain of learning became one of humanity's greatest strengths. It is easy to think of ancient history as a series of distant events, but the people of Mesopotamia experienced their lives one ordinary day at a time. They woke before sunrise, worked beneath the hot sun, shared meals with family, celebrated festivals, worried about poor harvests, laughed with friends, and hoped tomorrow would be better than yesterday. These simple moments rarely appear in history books, yet they form the true heart of civilization. Great cities were built not only by kings, but by countless anonymous workers, carrying bricks, digging canals, shaping pottery, weaving cloth, and recording information on clay tablets. Without their patience and determination, none of the great achievements of Mesopotamia would have been possible. Today, when visitors stand before the ruins of ancient ziggurats or look at cuneiform tablets displayed inside museums, they are seeing more than archaeological artifacts. They are looking at the earliest evidence of humanity's determination to organize society, preserve knowledge, and build a future that would outlast a single generation. That quiet determination continues to inspire historians, archaeologists, and curious travelers from every corner of the world. The story of Mesopotamia reminds us that civilization is never created overnight. It grows slowly through cooperation, curiosity, resilience, and the willingness to learn from both success and failure. Perhaps that is why the cradle of civilization still captures our imagination after so many thousands of years. It is not simply the story of the first cities. It is the story of the first people who proved that when communities share knowledge, work together, and dream beyond the needs of a single day, they can create a legacy that echoes across the ages and shapes the future of all humanity. As the centuries continue to pass, the story of Mesopotamia becomes more than the history of one region. It becomes a reminder of how civilization itself begins. Every society, no matter how advanced it eventually becomes, starts with people solving simple problems together. In Mesopotamia, those problems included controlling the rivers, growing enough food, protecting communities, and keeping accurate records. Each solution led naturally to another discovery. Better farming supported larger populations. Larger populations required organized governments. Governments needed written records, and written records encouraged education, mathematics, and administration. Step by step, without anyone realizing the full significance of their actions, the foundations of the modern world were quietly taking shape. It is remarkable that so many innovations emerged from a landscape that could be both generous and unforgiving. The same rivers that nourished fields could also sweep away homes. The same fertile plains that produced abundant Harvests attracted invading armies, seeking wealth and control. Living in such an environment required resilience. Communities learned to prepare for uncertainty rather than expect perfect conditions. They stored grain for difficult years, repaired canals after floods, rebuilt walls after conflicts, and continued teaching their children despite every hardship. That ability to recover again and again may have been one of Mesopotamia's greatest achievements. Even today, resilience remains one of the qualities that allows societies to endure through changing times. Historians often describe Mesopotamia as the cradle of civilization, but perhaps it can also be called the cradle of human cooperation. Thousands of strangers learned to trust one another enough to build cities, manage resources, and create systems that benefited entire populations. Such cooperation did not eliminate conflict, yet it demonstrated that lasting progress depends upon people working toward shared goals. Looking back across more than 5,000 years, the greatest wonder is not simply that these ancient cities existed, but that their ideas survived every empire that replaced them. Long after their temples became ruins and their languages fell silent, their inventions continued traveling across the world through later civilizations. In that sense, Mesopotamia never truly disappeared. It simply became part of the foundation beneath every civilization that followed. Its story reminds us that history is not only about the rise and fall of kingdoms, it is about the enduring power of human curiosity, determination, and the willingness to build something that will outlive the people who first imagined it. As we reflect on the remarkable journey of Mesopotamia, it becomes clear that its greatest contribution was not simply being the first civilization, but showing future generations what civilization could become. Before cities, laws, and writing existed, knowledge could easily disappear when an elder passed away or a village was abandoned. Mesopotamia changed that forever. By recording information on clay tablets, people created a bridge between generations. Lesson learned by one person could now teach someone living hundreds of years later. This simple but revolutionary idea allowed human knowledge to grow instead of constantly beginning again. Every civilization that followed inherited this gift in one form or another. It is difficult to imagine the modern world without written records, libraries, or schools. Yet all of these ideas have roots reaching back to the ancient cities. Beside the Tigris and Euphrates, even today, researchers continue making discoveries that deepen our understanding of this extraordinary world. New excavations reveal hidden neighborhoods, forgotten temples, and workshops where skilled craftsmen once spent their days creating objects of beauty and usefulness. Tiny details, such as fingerprints preserved in dried clay or footprints left in ancient streets, remind us that history is made by real people rather than distant legends. Someone carefully shaped every brick, planted every field, and carved every symbol that has survived to the present day. Those ordinary individuals never expected their work to be remembered for thousands of years, yet their quiet efforts became part of humanity's shared heritage. Perhaps that is the most inspiring lesson Mesopotamia offers us. Lasting achievements are rarely created through a single dramatic event. Instead, they grow patiently through countless acts of cooperation, curiosity, and perseverance. A canal dug to improve irrigation, a student learning to write, or a merchant honestly recording a transaction may have seemed insignificant at the time, but together these small actions transformed the course of history. As the gentle waters of the Tigris and Euphrates continue flowing across the same ancient plains today, they pass the places where civilization first learned to write its story. Though the voices of those early builders have long since fallen silent, the ideas they created continue speaking to every generation. Their legacy lives on wherever people value learning, preserve knowledge, solve problems together, and dream of building a better future than the one they inherited. The legacy of Mesopotamia also reminds us that history is never truly finished. Every generation asks new questions about the past, and each discovery offers another opportunity to understand where humanity began. Archaeologists often describe the region as one enormous puzzle with many pieces still hidden beneath the earth. Some ancient cities have only been partially explored, while others remain almost completely untouched. Beneath those quiet mounds may lie temples that have never seen daylight since antiquity, workshops where craftsmen left their tools exactly where they finished their final day's work, or libraries filled with tablets that no modern person has yet translated. The possibility of uncovering another forgotten chapter keeps researchers returning year after year. Modern technology has become one of their greatest allies. Drones photograph landscapes from above, revealing the outlines of buried streets and canals invisible from the ground. Laser scanning creates detailed maps of ruined buildings, allowing experts to study fragile structures without causing damage. Computers help scholars compare thousands of cuneiform symbols, making the slow work of translation more accurate than ever before. These remarkable tools connect the newest achievements of science with one of the oldest civilizations in history, creating an extraordinary partnership between the ancient and modern worlds. Yet, despite all of our technology, many of the most meaningful discoveries remain surprisingly simple. A child's toy carved from clay reminds us that children laughed and played long before recorded history as we usually imagine it. A carefully repaired cooking pot shows that families valued practical possessions, enough to mend them instead of throwing them away. A letter between relatives separated by distance reveals love, concern, and hope that feel completely familiar today. These quiet moments often leave the deepest impression because they remind us that the people of Mesopotamia were not so different from ourselves. Across thousands of years, the desire to care for family, learn new skills, overcome challenges, and create a better future has remained remarkably constant. Perhaps that is why the story of Mesopotamia continues to captivate people around the world. It is more than the story of the first cities or the first writing. It is the story of humanity discovering its own potential. It shows how cooperation, curiosity, patience, and imagination transformed scattered settlements into thriving civilizations whose influence still reaches into our lives today. Even after 5,000 years, the quiet voices preserved on clay tablets continue reminding us that every great achievement begins with ordinary people willing to dream a little bigger than the generation before them. Another reason Mesopotamia remains so important is that it teaches us humility. Every civilization believes its greatest achievements will last forever, yet history tells a different story. The people of Uruk, Babylon, and Nineveh built enormous walls, magnificent temples, and powerful kingdoms that seemed impossible to destroy. For generations, they stood as symbols of strength and prosperity. Yet time, changing climates, wars, and shifting political powers slowly transformed thriving cities into quiet ruins. Their story reminds us that no empire is permanent. What truly survives are the ideas that people choose to preserve and pass forward. That lesson is just as meaningful today as it was thousands of years ago. Imagine standing beside the Euphrates as evening approaches. The golden light reflects across the water while birds glide silently overhead. Farmers return from the fields carrying their tools. Merchants close the wooden doors of their shops, and smoke rises gently from family hearths where simple meals are being prepared. Somewhere inside a temple, a scribe carefully finishes another clay tablet before placing it on a shelf, believing it will help future generations understand the present. He cannot possibly know that the tablet will survive for thousands of years, waiting patiently until modern Archaeologists uncover it, and scholars learn to read its ancient symbols once again. That single moment creates an invisible connection between two people separated by 50 centuries. One writes and another eventually reads. History itself becomes a conversation across time. Perhaps that is the greatest miracle of Mesopotamia. It allowed human knowledge to outlive the people who first created it. Every preserved record became another voice refusing to disappear into silence. Even when cities collapsed and kingdoms vanished, the written word continued carrying memories into the future. Today, students, historians, and curious travelers from every part of the world continue learning from those same clay tablets. Their questions may be modern, but many of the answers still come from the ancient land between two rivers. As we quietly leave Mesopotamia behind, we carry more than facts about kings, temples, or battles. We carry an appreciation for the countless ordinary people whose patience, intelligence, and cooperation shaped the beginning of civilization itself. Their lives remind us that history is not only created by famous rulers, it is built every single day by individuals whose names may never appear in books, yet whose efforts quietly change the world for generations that follow. And in that sense, the story of Mesopotamia is not only the beginning of civilization, it is also the beginning of us. If we could ask the people of Mesopotamia a single question today, it might be whether they knew they were changing the course of history. The answer would almost certainly be no. To them, life was filled with ordinary responsibilities. Fields needed watering before sunrise, canals had to be repaired after seasonal floods, children required teaching, and markets opened with the first light of day. Every sunrise brought another list of practical tasks, and every sunset marked another day of work completed. Yet it was precisely these ordinary routines that gradually transformed scattered settlements into the first true civilization. History often celebrates great kings and famous battles, but civilizations are sustained by ordinary people whose names are rarely remembered. The baker who rose before dawn, the shepherd guiding his flock across the plain, the potter shaping fresh clay, the merchant counting goods before a long journey, and the scribe carefully recording each transaction, all played an equally important role. Without their daily efforts, no king could have ruled and no city could have flourished. Ancient Mesopotamia reminds us that lasting achievements are always built upon countless small acts of dedication. It also teaches us the importance of adapting to change. Over thousands of years, the region experienced floods, droughts, invasions, political upheaval, and shifting trade routes. Some cities disappeared while others rose to prominence. Languages evolved, rulers came and went, and new customs gradually replaced old traditions. Yet through every period of uncertainty, people continued planting crops, teaching their children, and preserving knowledge. Their resilience allowed civilization to survive even when individual kingdoms did not. This ability to adapt became one of humanity's greatest strengths and remains just as valuable in the modern world. Looking back now, it is almost impossible to separate our own history from theirs. The first experiments in organized government, written communication, urban planning, mathematics, and law all helped create the foundations upon which later societies continued building. Every generation inherited these ideas, improved them, and passed them onward. In that way, the spirit of Mesopotamia never truly disappeared. It quietly became part of every civilization that followed. As the moon rises above the peaceful rivers once more and the warm evening breeze moves gently across the ancient plains, it is comforting to imagine that somewhere beneath the earth, countless clay tablets still rest undisturbed, patiently waiting to tell new stories about the world's first civilization. Even after thousands of years, Mesopotamia still has secrets to share, reminding us that the oldest chapters of human history are never completely finished and that There is always more waiting to be discovered. There is also something deeply comforting about the pace of life in ancient Mesopotamia. Unlike the fast-moving world we know today, daily routines followed the rhythm of nature. The rising sun signaled the beginning of work, while the setting sun marked the time to return home. The changing seasons determined when seeds were planted and when crops were gathered. The rivers decided whether a year would bring abundance or hardship. People could not rush these cycles. They learned to wait patiently, understanding that some things could only happen in their proper time. This close relationship with nature shaped their view of the world. Every successful harvest was a reason for gratitude, and every difficult season reminded them of the importance of preparation and cooperation. Families stored food, repaired homes, and shared responsibilities because they understood that survival depended on the strength of the entire community rather than the success of one individual. Even celebrations reflected this sense of togetherness. Festivals brought music, dancing, shared meals, and religious ceremonies that united entire cities. For a short time, the worries of daily life gave way to laughter and storytelling beneath the open sky. Children listened to tales of heroic kings and powerful gods, while older generations passed along lessons learned through years of experience. In this way, traditions survived not only through writing, but also through memory and conversation. As generations came and went, every parent became a teacher, and every elder became a guardian of the past. One of the most remarkable qualities of Mesopotamian society was its ability to combine practical knowledge with imagination. Engineers designed complex irrigation systems, while poets composed stories that explored friendship, courage, and the search for meaning. Astronomers carefully observed the heavens, while artists decorated temples and everyday objects with beautiful patterns inspired by nature. Science, religion, craftsmanship, and storytelling all developed side by side, creating a culture that was both practical and deeply creative. Perhaps this balance explains why Mesopotamia continues to fascinate people today. It was not simply a civilization of rulers and monuments. It was a civilization of thinkers, builders, dreamers, and ordinary families trying to create a better future for those who would come after them. As night settles peacefully over the ancient plains once again, imagine the final lamps glowing softly inside mud brick homes while the quiet sound of flowing water fills the darkness. Above the same, stars shine across the sky that inspired the earliest astronomers thousands of years ago. Beneath that timeless sky, the story of Mesopotamia gently reminds us that every great journey in human history begins with a single step, and every civilization begins with people who dare to imagine a future beyond their own lifetime. Over time, the memory of Mesopotamia became woven into the history of countless civilizations that followed. Greek historians wrote about the great cities of the East with admiration. Persian rulers governed lands once occupied by ancient kingdoms, and later scholars preserved stories that might otherwise have vanished forever. Even when the names of old empires were gradually forgotten, the foundations they had built remained. Roads followed ancient trade routes. New cities rose near old settlements, and generation after generation continued living beside the same rivers that had nourished civilization from the very beginning. The landscape changed, rulers changed, and languages evolved, but the importance of the region never completely disappeared. Walking through the ruins today, one can still imagine the sounds that once filled these silent places. The steady tapping of a scribe pressing symbols into wet clay. The laughter of children racing through narrow streets. The voices of merchants calling customers toward colorful market stalls. The rhythmic footsteps of workers carrying baskets of mud bricks beneath the warm afternoon sun. These sounds have faded into history, yet the imagination can easily bring them back to life. Every broken wall and weathered stone hints at countless ordinary days that were once filled with hope, effort, and purpose. It is easy to focus on the grand achievements of Mesopotamia, but perhaps its most remarkable success was creating communities where people depended upon one another. Farmers relied on builders to maintain canals. Builders relied on craftsmen for tools. Merchants relied on scribes to record transactions. And rulers relied on everyone to keep society functioning. This network of cooperation allowed cities to grow larger than anything humanity had previously experienced. In many ways, civilization itself was an agreement between strangers to work together for a shared future. That simple idea remains just as powerful today as it was 5,000 years ago. As archaeologists continue uncovering new discoveries, the story of Mesopotamia becomes richer with every passing decade. Another tablet is translated. Another forgotten building emerges from beneath the soil. Another mystery finds its answer, while new questions appear. History remains alive because curiosity never ends. The cradle of civilization still has countless stories waiting beneath the earth, patiently preserved by time itself. As the rivers continue their endless journey toward the sea beneath, the quiet glow of the evening sky, they carry with them the memory of the first cities, the first writers, the first lawmakers, and the first dreamers who dared to believe that people working together could build something that would outlast their own lifetimes. Their dream became civilization, and that dream continues to shape the world to this very day. As our quiet journey through Mesopotamia continues, it becomes easier to understand why historians often call this region the birthplace of organized human society. Here, people discovered that cooperation could achieve far more than individual effort alone. Entire communities worked side by side to dig canals stretching for miles, strengthen riverbanks before the floods arrived, and construct temples and city walls that would stand for generations. None of these projects could have been completed by one person or even one family. They required planning, trust, and a shared belief that today's hard work would create a better tomorrow. That simple idea became one of the strongest foundations of civilization itself. Mesopotamia also reminds us that knowledge is one of the few treasures that grows stronger when it is shared. A skilled farmer taught his children how to read the rivers. A master potter showed apprentices how to shape clay without cracks. A scribe patiently demonstrated each cuneiform symbol until a student could copy it perfectly. Generation after generation, wisdom was passed from experienced hands to younger ones. This quiet exchange of knowledge allowed society to improve steadily over centuries instead of beginning from nothing each time. It is a tradition that continues in classrooms, workshops, and homes all around the world today. Another remarkable feature of Mesopotamian life was its respect for careful observation. Farmers watched the seasons. Astronomers studied the stars. Merchants measured weights with precision, and builders learned which materials could survive the harsh climate. Progress came not through luck, but through paying close attention to the world around them. Small improvements accumulated year after year until they transformed everyday life. Looking back across thousands of years, these gradual changes seem almost invisible, yet together they shaped the future of humanity. Even the quiet evenings carried their own rhythm. After the heat of the day faded, families gathered outside their homes where cooler air drifted across the streets. Stories were told beneath a sky filled with brilliant stars, untouched by modern city lights. Children listened with wonder as elders spoke of legendary kings, distant lands, and the powerful rivers that had given life to their people. Those evenings strengthened families just as surely as the canals strengthened the fields. They reminded every generation that they belonged to something larger than themselves as darkness settled gently across the plains once more. The cities of Mesopotamia rested beneath the same constellations that still shine above us tonight. Though thousands of years have passed, those ancient stars continue watching over the rivers where civilization first learned to write, to build, to govern, and to dream. In their silent light, the legacy of Mesopotamia lives on, inviting each new generation to remember where so much of humanity's remarkable story first began. The more we learn about Mesopotamia, the more we realize that its story is not only about the distant past, but also about the enduring qualities of humanity itself. Curiosity encouraged people to experiment with new farming techniques. Patience inspired scribes to spend years mastering hundreds of complex symbols. Courage allowed merchants to travel dangerous roads in search of distant markets, while determination helped entire communities rebuild after floods or invasions. These qualities are timeless. They connected the first civilizations to every generation that followed, including our own. It is remarkable that a society built from sun-dried mud bricks could leave behind ideas strong enough to survive for more than 5,000 years. Even though the buildings themselves gradually returned to the earth, the knowledge created inside them continued its journey through history. Every discovery became the starting point for another, forming an unbroken chain of learning that stretched across continents and centuries. Looking closely at Mesopotamian life also reveals a deep respect for balance. People understood that prosperity depended upon maintaining harmony between nature and human effort. Rivers provided fertile soil, but only careful planning could turn that gift into reliable harvests. Wealth created opportunities, but only fair administration could prevent disorder. Knowledge brought progress, but only if it was carefully preserved and passed to future generations. These lessons remained relevant long after the ancient kingdoms themselves had disappeared. In many ways, Mesopotamia demonstrated that civilization is not defined by impressive buildings alone, but by the relationships people build with one another. Trust, cooperation, responsibility, and shared purpose allowed communities to achieve goals far beyond the abilities of any individual. That spirit can still be recognized in modern societies wherever people work together toward a common future. As evening settles peacefully across the ancient plains one final time, imagine a gentle breeze moving through fields of barley, while the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates quietly reflect the fading light of the sky. The bustling markets have fallen silent, temple courtyards rest beneath the stars, and families gather inside their homes after another long day. Somewhere, a scribe places a freshly finished clay tablet onto a shelf, never knowing that thousands of years later, someone on the other side of the world would read the words he carefully recorded. That simple act of preserving knowledge became one of the greatest gifts Mesopotamia ever gave humanity. It reminds us that while lives are temporary, ideas have the power to travel across countless generations, carrying the voices of the past into the future and ensuring that the world's first civilization will never truly be forgotten. As the final chapters of Mesopotamia's long history unfolded, one truth became impossible to ignore. Civilizations are remembered not because they last forever, but because they change the world in lasting ways. Mesopotamia did exactly that. It transformed scattered farming communities into organized cities, turned spoken words into written history, and showed that people could accomplish extraordinary things by working together. Its influence quietly spread far beyond its own borders, inspiring later cultures that would build upon the foundations first laid between the Tigris and Euphrates. Every generation borrowed something from those who came before, adding new ideas while preserving the most valuable old ones. In this way, the story of Mesopotamia never truly ended. It simply became part of a much larger human story that continues today. Even now, scholars from around the world dedicate their lives to studying its ruins, translating forgotten tablets, and uncovering cities that remained hidden for thousands of years. Each discovery reminds us that the ancient world was far more advanced than many once believed. Behind every broken wall stood skilled builders. Behind every clay tablet sat a patient scribe. Behind every successful harvest were families who understood the importance of cooperation and careful planning. These ordinary people rarely appear in history books by name, yet they carried civilization forward one day at a time. Their quiet dedication deserves as much admiration as the achievements of famous kings. Perhaps that is why Mesopotamia continues to capture our imagination after so many centuries. It is not only the birthplace of cities or writing. It is the birthplace of possibility. It was the place where humanity first began imagining a future, larger than a single village or a single lifetime. As darkness gently settles across the ancient river valleys once again, the flowing waters continue their endless journey, just as they did 5,000 years ago. The great ziggurats may be silent, the bustling markets long gone, and the voices of the scribes carried away by time. Yet their legacy remains alive in every book that is written, every law that is recorded, every classroom where knowledge is shared, and every community built through cooperation. The cradle of civilization may now rest in quiet ruins, but its heartbeat can still be felt wherever people choose to learn from the past, build for the future, and believe that even the smallest actions can leave a lasting mark on history. One final image remains in our minds as we leave the world of ancient Mesopotamia behind. Imagine standing quietly on the roof of a great ziggurat as the sun slowly disappears beyond the western horizon. Below you, the city begins to settle into the calm of evening. The last merchants finish their conversations before closing wooden shutters. Farmers return through the city, gates with tired animals, after a long day in the fields. Children laugh one final time before being called home, while the warm glow of oil lamps begins appearing one by one inside mud brick houses. The sounds of the busy marketplace gradually fade until only the gentle murmur of the rivers remains. The Tigris and Euphrates continue flowing exactly as they have for countless generations, carrying fresh water across the fertile plains that first gave birth to civilization. Above, the stars emerge in extraordinary numbers, filling the clear night sky that ancient astronomers watched with endless curiosity. Somewhere in the darkness, a priest quietly studies the constellations, believing the heavens hold messages about the future. Nearby, a scribe carefully places another completed clay tablet onto a shelf, never imagining that thousands of years later, people from every corner of the world would still read his words. It is a peaceful scene, yet one filled with quiet significance. Every ordinary moment taking place across the city is helping shape the future of humanity. No one realizes they are living at the beginning of history. To them, tomorrow will simply bring another sunrise, another day of work, another harvest, another lesson for a child, another journey to the marketplace. Yet those ordinary days become extraordinary when viewed across 5,000 years. They remind us that history is not created only through dramatic victories or famous rulers. It is built patiently through millions of small decisions made by ordinary people who choose to work together, share knowledge, and prepare a better future for the next generation. Long after the kingdoms of Mesopotamia disappeared, those values remained. They passed quietly from one civilization to another, becoming part of the foundation upon which the modern world would eventually stand. Even today, when we open a book, write a message, study the stars, record important information, or build communities through cooperation, we continue a tradition that began beside these ancient rivers. The cities may now rest beneath layers of earth, but their greatest achievement was never made of stone or brick. It was the enduring belief that knowledge should be preserved, that people accomplish more together than alone, and that every generation has the responsibility to leave the world a little wiser than it found it. As the memory of Mesopotamia stretches farther into the past, it becomes clear that its greatest monument was never a palace, a temple, or even a mighty city. Its greatest monument was the human mind. In these fertile valleys, people learned that ideas could be preserved instead of forgotten. A story no longer had to disappear when the storyteller passed away. A law could remain unchanged for generations. A scientific observation could be compared with another made decades later. This simple realization transformed human history forever. Knowledge became something that could grow with every generation rather than begin again from the beginning. That quiet revolution may have been the most important achievement of all. Looking across the thousands of years since those first cities appeared, we can see how every civilization inherited a small part of Mesopotamia's legacy. The Greeks expanded philosophy and science. The Romans developed law and engineering, and countless later societies introduced their own remarkable achievements. Yet beneath all of these accomplishments lay foundations that had first been explored. Beside two ancient rivers, the people of Mesopotamia would never have imagined trains, airplanes, satellites, or computers, but they understood something even more important. They understood that progress depends upon preserving knowledge and sharing it with those who come next. Every teacher passing wisdom to a student, every parent guiding a child, and every craftsman training an apprentice continued a tradition that had begun thousands of years earlier. Time changed the tools, but not the principle itself. Even today, visitors who stand among the ruins of ancient cities often describe a profound sense of silence. Wind moves gently through. Broken walls where thousands of voices once filled. The streets with conversation. Birds circle above temple foundations that once stood proudly against the sky. The marketplaces have long since disappeared, yet the land still seems to remember. Beneath every step lie countless stories, waiting patiently beneath layers of earth, each one belonging to someone who once believed tomorrow would be just another ordinary day. None of them knew they were living in the first great civilization. None imagined that people, thousands of years in the future, would travel across the world simply to learn about their lives. Yet that is exactly what happened. Their achievements outlived every king who ruled them and every empire that conquered them. The rivers still flow as they always have, carrying fresh water across the same plains where humanity first learned to build cities, record history, and dream beyond a single lifetime. In their quiet, endless journey, they continue reminding us that while civilizations may rise and fall, the ideas they leave behind can travel far beyond the limits of time itself. Although thousands of years separate us from the people of Mesopotamia, their world is not as distant as it first appears. They watched children grow into adults, celebrated successful harvests, worried about uncertain futures, and hoped that the work of today would make tomorrow a little easier. They admired beautiful craftsmanship, respected wisdom gained through experience, and believed that each generation carried a responsibility to those who would follow. In many ways, these timeless values continue connecting us across the vast distance of history. Perhaps that is why the ruins of Mesopotamia inspire such quiet reflection. They remind us that every modern city, every library, every courtroom, every school, and every written page belongs to a story that began long ago beside two remarkable rivers. The people who shaped the first clay tablets could never have imagined that their symbols would one day be studied in universities across the globe, translated into dozens of languages, and admired by millions of people they would never meet. Yet their careful work achieved exactly that. It carried their voices safely through thousands of years, until they could speak once again. The same spirit of discovery that encouraged them to observe the stars, improve irrigation, and record knowledge still lives within humanity today. Scientists continue exploring distant planets. Historians uncover forgotten civilizations. And teachers pass new ideas to young minds just as scribes once. Instructed students inside the schools of Ur and Babylon. The tools have changed beyond recognition, but the desire to understand the world remains exactly the same. It is one of the few qualities that has never grown old. As the night grows deeper over the ancient plains, imagine the gentle sound of reeds moving beside the riverbanks, while cool air settles across the fields. The great cities rest peacefully beneath the earth, hidden but never truly forgotten. Somewhere beneath layers of soil lie streets where countless footsteps once echoed, homes where families gathered after long days of work, and workshops where craftsmen patiently transformed simple materials into objects of lasting beauty. Every buried stone and every preserved tablet reminds us that civilization was not created in a single moment. It was built gradually through patience, cooperation, imagination, and hope. Those quiet virtues became the strongest foundation of all. Long after kingdoms disappeared and monuments crumbled, they continued traveling through history, inspiring generation after generation to learn, create, and build something worthy of those who would one day come after them. In that way, the story of Mesopotamia never truly belongs only to the past. It continues unfolding wherever human curiosity, knowledge, and cooperation shape a better future for the world. The story of Mesopotamia also encourages us to think about how future generations will remember our own time. The ancient people never expected their daily lives to become subjects of history. They simply did what needed to be done. They repaired canals before the flood season, recorded harvests on clay tablets, taught children how to write, traded with distant neighbors, and gathered with their families as the evening sky filled with stars. Yet those ordinary moments became extraordinary because they revealed how civilization was truly built. Historians today often value a simple household record just as much as the inscription of a famous king because both reveal different parts of the same human story. Every object uncovered from the soil adds another voice to a conversation that has continued for more than 5,000 years. A worn farming tool speaks of hard work beneath the hot Mesopotamian sun. A carefully decorated bowl reflects pride in craftsmanship. A school tablet covered with practice exercises reminds us that learning has always required patience and determination. These discoveries allow us to see the ancient world not as a collection of ruins, but as a living community filled with hopes, challenges, and quiet achievements. Perhaps that is the greatest gift archaeology offers. It transforms forgotten civilizations into familiar human experiences. The distance of time begins to disappear, replaced by a sense of connection with people who lived unimaginably long ago. Standing among the remains of Ur, Babylon, or Nineveh today, it is easy to imagine the streets once alive with conversation, the smell of freshly baked bread drifting through the air, and the sound of craftsmen shaping wood, stone, and clay into useful objects. The ruins may be silent now, but they still carry echoes of those busy days. Every generation since has inherited a small part of what began there, whether through writing, mathematics, law, engineering, or the simple belief that knowledge should never be lost. As the rivers continue flowing through the ancient valleys, unchanged by the passing centuries, they quietly remind us that human history is one continuous journey. Civilizations rise, flourish, and eventually fade, but the ideas they create continue traveling forward, carried by teachers, explorers, writers, builders, and dreamers. Mesopotamia was the first great chapter in that journey, yet its influence never truly ended. It remains alive wherever people gather to learn from the past, work together in the present, and build a future that will one day become history for generations still to come. Even after spending so much time exploring Mesopotamia, it still feels as though we have only scratched the surface of its remarkable story. Every excavation uncovers another fragment of a civilization that refused to let its knowledge disappear. Historians often compare the region to a vast library whose shelves remain buried beneath layers of earth. Every season of archaeological work reveals another page, another voice, and another glimpse into a world that existed thousands of years before most of recorded history. Some discoveries are grand, such as palace walls covered with carved scenes of royal ceremonies and military victories. Others are far more humble, yet equally meaningful. A child's footprint preserved in dried mud, a cracked water jar repaired with great care, or a shopping list pressed into a small clay tablet tells us just as much about daily life as the achievements of kings. These ordinary objects remind us that civilization was built by countless people whose names have long been forgotten, but whose work continues speaking across the centuries. There is something deeply peaceful about imagining an evening in one of Mesopotamia's ancient cities. The day's heat begins to fade as a gentle breeze moves across the rooftops. Families gather together after hours of labor, sharing bread, dates, vegetables, and stories from the day. Oil lamps cast a warm glow inside simple homes while the sounds of the marketplace slowly disappear into the distance. Above the city stretches a sky filled with brilliant stars, untouched by modern lights. Somewhere, an elderly storyteller retells the adventures of Gilgamesh to children, listening with wide eyes, while nearby a young apprentice carefully practices writing the same cuneiform symbols he copied earlier that afternoon. These quiet scenes may never have been considered important by the people living them, yet they are the moments that truly shaped civilization. Great empires are remembered because ordinary lives gave them strength. The people of Mesopotamia understood that the future depended upon preserving knowledge, teaching the next generation, and working together despite hardship. That lesson remains just as meaningful today as it was 5,000 years ago. The cities may have fallen silent, their temples may stand in ruins, and their rulers may have become distant names in history books. But the values that allowed civilization to flourish continue to endure. Every time people cooperate to solve a problem, pass knowledge to a child, protect their communities, or build something that will benefit future generations, they unknowingly continue a tradition that first began in the fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates. In that quiet way, the spirit of Mesopotamia still lives on, not only in museums and archaeological sites, but in the everyday actions that continue shaping human civilization. Before we finally leave the world of ancient Mesopotamia behind, take one last quiet look across the wide plains where it all began. The rivers still flow with the same steady rhythm they followed thousands of years ago. The morning mist still rises above the water. Birds still circle over the reeds, and the wind still carries grains of sand across the land. Where humanity first learned to build cities, so much has changed, yet in some ways, nothing has changed at all. Nature continues its endless cycle, quietly watching civilizations come and go. The kings who once believed their empires would last forever have long since returned to history. The magnificent palaces that amazed visitors now rest as silent ruins beneath the open sky. The towering ziggurats that once touched the heavens have been worn down by rain, wind, and time. Yet somehow the people of Mesopotamia still speak to us. They speak through the marks they pressed into wet clay, through the canals they carved across the earth, through the laws they recorded, and through the stories they chose to preserve for generations they would never meet. Perhaps that is the true meaning of civilization. It is not measured only by the size of its cities or the wealth of its rulers. It is measured by what it leaves behind for the future. Mesopotamia left behind something greater than monuments. It left behind ideas, The idea that knowledge should be written down instead of forgotten. The idea that communities are stronger when people cooperate. The idea that laws should exist for everyone, that learning should be valued, and that every generation has a responsibility to pass its wisdom to the next. These simple ideas traveled farther than any army ever could. They crossed deserts, seas, and centuries until they became part of the world we know today. If the people of Uruk or Babylon could somehow look into our modern world, they would be astonished by airplanes, computers, towering skyscrapers, and spacecraft exploring distant planets. Yet they would also recognize something familiar.